courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode 512. I am Andrew Forum, Andrew NLSC on X. With me as always, my co-host Derek, DV3 Forum, and DV3G, and DV384 on X. Derek, with NBA 2K24 out for a few months now, and NBA 2K25 already in pre-production, our minds are turning to Wishlist. It's Wishlist season. That's what we're going to be talking about this week, of course. But what else is on your mind?
So I wanted to give a injury update.
Yes.
As I stated on the prior show, I suffered a pretty severe injury playing basketball in one of our local leagues. And unfortunately, the results from the MRI and the CT scan showed that the injury is a lot worse than originally thought. So here's the extent of the injuries. So we have a complete ACL rupture, a complex lateral meniscus tear, a MCL sprain, so a stretch, so nothing needs to be done about that. But one of the worst parts of this is a fractured lateral femoral condyle, so my femur. And it's about 16 millimeters in length. I think they said 6 millimeters depth-wise. So here's the crazy thing, Andrew. I don't feel any pain right now. It's about 2.5 weeks after the injury, and I am walking around. I'm doing stairs. I'm pivoting. I'm changing directions. There's a little clicking, I think, from the meniscus. But like I told you before we started recording, if MRIs didn't exist and or I didn't have insurance that covered an MRI, so I didn't get one, I'd be preparing to play in the playoffs right now of the 3 leagues that I was in. And that is absolutely wild to me, because the first words that my doctor told me after he saw the MRI is that, he goes, it's really bad. I want to prepare you. It's really bad. But I would never have known that based on having no pain and the range of motion and functionality that I have in it right now. But this has been a super tough time because I'm mobile. I love being up and about. I like the simple things like being able to get in my car, drive to the store, pick up something quick, and then come back. My cat wakes me up every single morning at like 5 a.m., paws my face, paws my arm in order to get me up. And him and I, because I live in a 3-floor townhouse, him and I walk together downstairs, and I give him a treat. I pet him. He goes over to his food dish, and he eats his food, and I pet him while he's eating, and he purrs, and then I come back up to bed and go to sleep. So this is like a routine, right? But when I have this surgery, basically because of the femoral condyle portion, it's a very complicated. I am going to have to be non-weight bearing for 6 to 8 weeks minimum, meaning I can't put any weight on this. And so I'm going to be stuck basically on the top floor of my home for possibly 2 months. And then even after that, people who've gone through ACL, tear, recovery, reconstruction, etc., the road to being able to walk normal and to have strength in that leg is long. It's brutal. In fact, to give you an idea of how long and brutal that is, Kawhi Leonard didn't truly come back, I want to say, until, 450 days after his ACL surgery?
Sure.
I want to say it was something like that.
Derrick Rose missed a whole season after that.
Right.
Yeah.
And these are the best athletes in the world, right?
Yeah.
Professional athletes, and I'm D for 3. So, and that doesn't even include the femoral condyle piece. So getting strength back in that area and, making sure that nothing goes wrong as far as the allograft cracking, et cetera. So that's the other piece of this. Allografts, Andrew. So they're looking at doing an allograft for the ACL reconstruction. And what an allograft is, it's actually like a donor ACL. So basically, somebody has to die. I get the ACL repair. They usually take it from a person's, at least at this practice, they take it from somebody's tibia because it's strong. And then that gets inserted to basically create an ACL for me. Like that's what that is. And then I also need an allograft for the fixing of the lateral femoral condyle, so the fixing of my femur. So 2 donor pieces in my body, the meniscus repair, and then basically being in a cast non-weight bearing for like 8 weeks. So I've gone through a period of feeling bad for myself.
Sure.
I've gone through a period of I wish I could turn back time and not do that spin move.
Yeah.
That I did. I wish I had just pulled up for 3 or pulled up in the mid-range or something like that. I've gone through a period where I was like, do I do the surgery? Maybe I don't. You know what I mean? Maybe I say, build the muscles in my legs around this stuff and continue my quality of life right now where I can do everything outside of playing basketball that I want to do, right? Which probably isn't the smartest decision, but that has crossed my mind.
Of course.
And then, you and I were talking before the call, and one of the best things about playing basketball is being part of the basketball family, right? In your local area. You make friends through basketball. You get to hear people's life updates, how they're doing. You get to cheer people on. People cheer you on. You get to, it's a Saturday morning and everybody's going to play pickup, and you walk in and everybody's like, hey man, what's up? And you guys play a couple hours of hoop and you get lost in that moment, and it's just great. And so like the community,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the community aspect of playing pickup and in local leagues and making friends and all of that stuff, not being able to have that, and that maybe not coming back again, depending on how I recover from this, because they're doing a 4-hour surgery, apparently. So the goal is they're fixing all 3 at once. So this is a crazy, complicated surgery. If the allografts fail or something goes wrong, I may never get back out there and play again. So yeah, it's been a really rough few days. I haven't been motivated to upload content really to the NLSC YouTube or to play basketball video games outside of with my brothers. And yeah, it's been brutal.
It's not the update that I was hoping to hear, that obviously that you were hoping to share with our listeners and the community. I saw your update on X, of course, a few days ago. I guess maybe 4 or 5 days ago from when this is going live. And it sounded pretty bad then. And then we got on the call today to record, and even worse news still. And obviously very sorry to hear it, man, and hoping for the best. And, it is a tough decision, as you say. Do you not do the surgery if that's an option, if that is a safe option at all? Do you preserve that quality of life? Do you weigh up the options of not playing ball as opposed to, that quality of life in the meantime? But I know you'll make the right decision. And yeah, we're all behind you as far as recovery and getting better like that. But man, yeah, that is tough news to hear.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks to those who responded to my post on X related to my injuries. I had a bunch of great responses and people, giving me words of encouragement and all of that. And it means more than you know. If I didn't do the surgery route, my doctor said that it's possible in these cases where I would need a total knee replacement in like 5 or 6 years. And I'm too young for that.
That's daunting. Yeah, that's very daunting.
I'm too young for that. So we will see what happens. It's hard to, I think the hardest thing when stuff like this happens is remaining positive and remaining optimistic. And I think that the mental game when things like this do happen is very important, right? That you mentally have control over the situation and that you're motivated and all of that stuff. And it's tough. It's very tough. However, I do want to point something out, Andrew. I was happy to hear that before this episode, you were watching Sean Kemp Portland Trailblazers highlights. That made me happy. And I want people to understand something, because there's a lot of people that make fun of, quote unquote, fat Kemp. But he, as we were talking about before the show, he still showed signs of just being a really good basketball player.
Well, the talent was there. He'd polished his game. When he came into the league, he was a bit of a raw athlete, had some skill, obviously, and could handle the ball, shoot a little bit, could certainly dunk and make a few of those short hooks, but he had the skill, and he developed that skill, and it was still there, even as his weight did balloon, and obviously dealing with the substance issues were the big thing in the later years as well.
Yeah, and I hate calling him Fat Kemp too, but that's what the video was titled.
Yes.
I think that
I'll go for the algorithm, I suppose. So, yeah.
Yeah, he was struggling with his weight. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And he had, in his later years with the Cavs when he was putting on that weight, even in his first year with the Cavs, he was a really good mid-range shooter. He had to be guarded out there. I used to watch games with him, when he was with the Cavs. I think he averaged 20 points per game that season with them. It was his first year, and he was an all-star with that team. And he would routinely score 20 to 24, 20 to 26 points on mostly mid-range jumpers. So people people know him as just a dunker, right? Like that's how he's remembered, right? The Rain Man, the amazing dunker. But he had other aspects of his game offensively that were really impressive. And one of those was that mid-range shot.
Oh, for sure. To that point, this account is kind of a Sean Kemp fan account, though it does post other... the person behind it does post other classic clips as well. Also posted a rare putback dunk by Kemp. At least I hadn't seen it before. One from his rookie year, 89-90. Yeah, and that was very impressive. It's always cool when you can see a highlight shared on YouTube or social media that you haven't seen before. You and I have obviously watched a lot of basketball over the years, so we've seen all the famous highlights. But sometimes you get to see one that you haven't seen before, and yeah, I love it when that happens.
Yeah, remember when I posted the Spurs Dominique Wilkins highlights on X?
Of course, yes.
Where he, late in his career, they picked him up as a free agent. David Robinson went down, and then Dominique Wilkins had to take on quite the scoring load. I think he averaged about 17 points a game that season. But in that year, remember, he also had a severe injury earlier in his career, and he came back from that.
ACL, yeah.
And, yeah, it was his ACL. And you can see him flying in for tip dunks in his late 30s with the San Antonio Spurs, one-handed, two-handed. You can still see him driving and throwing it down on the fast break. And he ended up improving his shot after his ACL injury and whatnot. And it's just, I love seeing the oddball highlights of players where maybe it was later in their career, maybe they were with a team that just doesn't look right on them, like when they're wearing the jersey and everything, but you still see just those sparks of brilliance. And it reminds you why that player was awesome.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was the same account or not. Certainly one of the ones I'm subscribed to on YouTube posted Patrick Ewing's last bucket as a Seattle Supersonic. That's a rarity too.
You know what's crazy about the Seattle Ewing and the Toronto Hakeem is you can watch them play, and you can still see their shot forms stayed the same. They still had sometimes the same looking spinning fadeaway and all of that. And it makes you question, maybe if they got the ball more, maybe they would have averaged more points, right? Maybe they would have been able to do a little more. But we don't know the full extent of, the injuries that they had and how they were taking a toll on those players, right? We don't know the full extent of the breakdown of those bodies. I know that Patrick Ewing, later in his career with Seattle and Orlando, was really having trouble moving laterally, right? Like switching out on the perimeter and just, even moving block to block. He just didn't look as fast as he used to. But I think what's crazy to me is watching the Toronto Hakeem and the Seattle and Orlando Ewing, and just, once again, just like Neek and just like, Kemp, later in his career, you just see those flashes of brilliance, and it shows why they were such great players. I am always floored, just like with the Wizards Jordan, Andrew.
Yeah.
Like the 50-plus points against the Hornets, scoring over 40 against the Nets, cooking, just absolutely torching Jason Kidd, Richard Jefferson, and Kenyon Martin when he was playing the Nets. They tried all these different defenders on Jordan, and he was just cooking all of them. And everything at age 38 through 40. And, that stuff is just so impressive.
And it is great to see, as you said, those flashes of brilliance those flashes of the players that they were. I do think that Wizards Jordan was quite underrated. You see people say, oh, he was washed then. He wasn't even a top 40 player in the league. Ridiculous. The skill was
he was an MVP candidate in 01-02 before he hurt his knee at the All-Star.
I was going to say, yeah, people forget that. He was putting up numbers along the lines of his last year with the Bulls in the weeks leading up to that knee injury and having to then miss the season. Came back for a few games, I think 7 games coming off the bench that year, playing very limited minutes. You know, that's if he just shut it down for the season, his numbers would have looked even better. But as he found his rhythm and got used to those teammates, he was putting up familiar numbers in the weeks leading up to that injury. Absolutely. But I've come to appreciate Wizards Jordan a little bit more. Always going to be weird for me as a longtime Bulls fan, obviously. But no, I think a lot of people disrespect that era of Jordan.
Leading up to All-Star break, his numbers were very, very comparable to T-Mac that season. And that's young/prime T-Mac, right? T-Mac was the man in Orlando. And the Wizards were also in, I want to say, the top 4 in the East at that time. They were primed for a playoff run.
Above 500, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and Jordan leading up to that All-Star break, if you look at his numbers, I want to say it was, 10 to 15 games before the All-Star break, he was averaging like 29 points a game or something like that. Solid rebounds and assists, and he was shooting efficiently. So he was getting his legs back there, right? And like you said, he looked and was putting up numbers very comparable to, his last couple of years in Chicago. So I definitely have always been impressed with the Wizards Jordan, and I didn't have like the sentimental value that you did, Jordan playing for the Bulls, your favorite team and everything, because I grew up a Celtics fan.
Yeah.
Right. So just seeing him come back, I didn't care what uniform it was in. Just seeing him come back and be able to do that and put on a show and put on that show that he did in the preseason game versus the Nets, even though they lost that game. But I think it was the first game at home, so in Washington, for Jordan in the preseason. And, he put on an absolute show that game. That was so exciting. But yeah, I still think he was just awesome with Washington.
And of course, those weird stints, those oddball stints, familiar faces in unfamiliar places, as I've talked about in Way Back Wednesday in that series, that it's fun to go back and play those oddball stints on the virtual hardwood as well. And a lot of the games that we revisit, actually, Derek, from the early 2000s, mid-2000s, we often look for those odd stints, do we not?
We do. I had a game recently with a community member on NBA 2K14 for the PC where we used Toronto Akeem versus Orlando Ewing, if you remember correctly, and I shared those highlights and whatnot. So I look for those oddball teams and oddball players and familiar faces in strange places because I think those matchups can be really fun.
Of course, Akeem played a big role in our epic comeback, NBA Inside Drive 2003. You put together that highlight reel. You can check that out on our YouTube channel. Of course, he wasn't with the Raptors then. He was still under contract, but did retire before the season began. He's still there in the game. We took advantage of that. And, man, what a fantastic game. We need to get into some Inside Drive 2003 again. But I have been playing a few different games this year, Derek. 3 weeks running, I have dipped into the collection, played something that I haven't spent as much time with. Street Hoops was the first one this year. We played that together, obviously. We talked about that in episode 510. Second week was NBA ShootOut, or rather the PAL version, Total NBA 96. What a great 90s title that is. Don't know why the PAL version was renamed. NBA ShootOut is a fine title, but they renamed it anyway to the Total NBA series in PAL regions. Again, very 90s, so I do appreciate that. And this just before we started recording, Derek, played NBA 08 on PS3. That is the Sony exclusive. We mentioned NBA 07 before. It is the game that came after it. Very familiar gameplay, obviously. And yeah, so far so good on playing something that I haven't played as much of each and every week so far this year. 3 for 3.
After you mentioned NBA ShootOut / at Total NBA, I put it on. And one thing that frustrates me about that game is that I try to use D Brown, and every single time I drive to the hoop, he tries to do something fancy. I get it. I get that he's the no-look dunk guy. I get that D Brown was, as a result of that, in that performance in the dunk contest, was looked at as a freak athlete and also a flashy player, but he didn't try to go behind his back on every drive, Andrew. He didn't try to bounce the ball to himself on every single drive. And I think that NBA shootout was definitely that hybrid arcade / simulation title. There's a play where I was on the fast break and I threw it to Dino Raja, and he did a 360 dunk where his head was way above the rim. I think his shoulders were at the rim, and he threw it down two-handed. So you have some, I don't know, NBA Jam style dunks kind of in the original NBA shootout. And I don't think it hurts the game, to be completely honest with you. It's kind of a unique, fresh look in that space for the time. And the gameplay is, it can be fun. I'm guessing you had a good time with it. I think that there's issues with passing. Sometimes, yes, you'll try to pass the ball in and think you're passing it to the guy that's right in front of you, and he'll throw it, 90 feet down the floor, and it will just get intercepted.
That's the worst part, the passing, trying to do the inbounds, the inbound logic. There's two different pass buttons as well. There's a long pass and a regular pass, and it's very easy to hit the long pass instead.
The long pass, yep.
Yeah. Yep. So that's a problem to begin with. But also, when you have players, as you said, there's no one waiting in the backcourt. No point guard, no shooting guard, not even a center just there to inbound to somebody who can be in the backcourt to bring the ball up. They're just all running to the front court, so you just make this blind pass, hope that it doesn't get intercepted. 9 times out of 10, it probably is going to be. That was a big frustration. I felt that shooting was a bit... The CPU could shoot. I found that I was missing way too many shots. So many charging calls, trying to dunk, or make a layup at the rim. I actually was a little bit underwhelmed by the game. I thought it was inferior to the first NBA in the Zone. Certainly NBA Live 96 is a superior game as well. Live 96 obviously is more in that sim style, whereas Shootout / Total NBA is that sim arcade hybrid, as you said. But, I mean, I wasn't unhappy to revisit it. I'm quite happy to see what games are all about and take them at face value. But yeah, I was a little bit underwhelmed by that because NBA in the Zone is a more fun game, that sim arcade hybrid that I've come to enjoy a lot more in recent years. But I mean, I still had a good time with the game. I still played it and sent you a highlight actually. But yeah, I was a little bit underwhelmed. It's not one of the stronger releases from that. Even for the time, it's not one of the stronger releases compared to its contemporaries.
So NBA in the Zone is definitely that sim arcade hybrid in a similar vein. That is true. If you remember correctly, we connected on that game and we were using the Warriors. And I want to say that there were several dunks with Chris Mullin from the free throw line.
Yeah.
Where he was going like behind his back in the air and stuff like that.
Rocking the baby from the free throw line.
And there's no more game that with 90s aesthetic music. Maybe NBA Live 97 competes with the original NBA in the Zone in this way.
NBA Jam, maybe.
NBA in the Zone is just incredibly 90s. That original title with the music that's playing while you're playing, and it's like go or whatever, like constantly. I think that NBA in the Zone, I agree, it's probably a superior title. I think that at times actually NBA Shootout can be more sim than NBA in the Zone. If you remember correctly, in that game of NBA in the Zone, I think probably 80% of our points were on spectacular dunks.
Easily,
right?
Yeah.
On Shootout, you can't get away with that because of those charge calls that you mentioned, because of the fact that the defense is more competent in that game. And if you're a defender in that game, you can slide your feet better than you can in NBA in the Zone. So you're stopping the computer from dunking so often. So I would say that maybe NBA Shootout is a little bit more sim than NBA in the Zone, but it's probably not more fun gameplay-wise.
No, I didn't enjoy it as much as a Live 96 or in the Zone, but it's definitely worth checking out. I will check it out again, give it a second look before and give it some more time before I do a Way Back Wednesday retrospective on it. Want to make sure that I've given it a fair chance. Did play a couple of games. I do think it's better on that classic view, as a lot of games at the time were. One funny thing about NBA in the Zone, actually, because I do have a Way Back Wednesday coming up on that. I think it's this week or possibly next week. I'll have to double check the schedule. But you can actually change the amount of time remaining. You can change the quarter length mid-game in NBA in the Zone. It's the weirdest thing.
I wish you could do that in real life to turn off those games that are absolutely horrible.
Speed it up, yeah.
Yeah, like Portland Trailblazers versus San Antonio Spurs, or like Portland Trailblazers versus Detroit Pistons. Like, let's turn that quarter length to 3 minutes for the fourth quarter,
Sim to
because
win,
I can't watch this anymore. Yeah.
Absolutely. But funny quirks like that. But I will go into more detail in Way Back Wednesday. And yeah, NBA '08. It's probably in many ways. Well, it's definitely behind 2K8. Live '08, I like Live '08 a little bit more than you do, as we've talked about on previous shows. I do think Live '08 may be a bit more solid across the board. NBA '08 by Sony is a bit looser, but it's fun. I had fun with that game. Played Seattle versus the Bobcats, Seattle Supersonics versus Charlotte Bobcats, two teams that are no longer in the league. Well, the Bobcats are, and they are the new Hornets, of course. Whenever you play a game where the Supersonics are still in the league, you've got to use the Sonics.
I mean, if you remember, we connected on NBA '07, actually, and played that. And I think NBA '07 and NBA '08 are pretty similar, gameplay-wise.
On sticks, yeah.
But how did you feel about playing NBA '07, a game that came out in 2006, with no commentary?
That was weird, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was weird. Yeah, like you see some indie titles out there, games like Axis Football and whatnot, that have commentary in their game, right? I thought it was bizarre that they released that game without any commentary. And if I remember correctly, NBA '06 was the same way. So NBA '06 and NBA '07 did not have any commentary. It feels weird after playing so many basketball video games that had commentary.
Once it became standard, yeah. I've seen other games do that. If you go with the wrestling games, SmackDown, Here Comes the Pain is one of the most highly regarded wrestling games, WWE branded wrestling games out there. And I do like it too, but they did actually remove commentary that year. I'm pretty sure that's the one they removed commentary on. SmackDown Shut Your Mouth, the previous year, did have commentary in it. So we have seen other series do that, and I guess it may be a space thing or a time thing when you're doing annual releases or whatever, but it is very weird after it became standard in games to not get any kind of commentary at all. Not even something like, go, like in NBA in the Zone, or gets the rebound, or, makes the shot. Just some very basic one-liners and repetitive one-liners. Not even that, just bare bones. It's definitely interesting, definitely weird to experience that. They did bring it back with '08. Kevin Calabro there doing a fantastic job, and that really lined up very well with me using the Supersonics, obviously. But yeah, it doesn't ruin '07. Certainly no more than some of the weird gameplay quirks anyway. But yeah, it's certainly strange for the atmosphere, because you do have that NBA on TNT presentation. Like, there's some pretty good presentation and overlays in those games, but then not having the commentary. It's weird.
SmackDown Shut Your Mouth. That's literally the name of the video game. Did that make you want to buy it more because of that Attitude Era? Is that...
Yeah, well, that was one of the Rock's catchphrases, so absolutely. You had Shut Your Mouth, then Here Comes the Pain, Brock Lesnar. After that, it went to SmackDown vs. Raw, and that was the series name for a while, and then it just went to WWE whatever year, and now it's WWE 2K, since 2K has got it. But yeah, when they had those subtitles like that, it definitely spoke of the attitude and ruthless aggression era that followed it. Yes.
Yeah, you know so much more about wrestling than I do. I never followed it. I'll still say the greatest wrestling video game I ever played was WCW versus NWO World Tour for the N64. But I was never really able to get into any wrestling games after that.
That's a good one, though. It is actually a good one, that one.
SmackDown Shut Your Mouth. I might have just bought that for the title, too.
Yes, definitely does stand out. But yeah, I've been revisiting these games, one per week. I will be picking those up again. I do need to cover Street Hoops and NBA '08, and I actually need to cover all of them for Way Back Wednesday in depth. I do want to spend some more time with them before I do. But yeah, once again, Derek, so far so good on revisiting a game each week, dipping into that collection, and playing something that I haven't played as much of before. Obviously, when I've added them to the collection, I've fired them up to make sure they're working, because you want to make sure you've bought something off eBay or wherever that is actually working and you have a working copy that you've paid for. But spending more time with it, really getting to know the game and have some fun with it, ideally, has been very rewarding. So I do want to keep my favourites in the rotation this year. That will be a thing, obviously, that I do throughout 2024 and beyond. But as I said, it's my goal to revisit these games and dip into the collection, play some games that I haven't played as much of and see what they're all about. So, yeah, 3 for 3 so far, and I'll looking to keep it going.
If I have this surgery, which is more than likely going to happen, you might see a lot more content go up on the NLSC, especially after maybe 1 week post-surgery, because I'm stuck. I'm going to be stuck in front of my TV for a good majority of every single day, and I am going to have to keep my mind occupied. I'm going to have to be doing something.
Oh, the Twitch stream is going to happen. Your D-bags are going to love it.
Yeah, we're going to have to actually create the D-bag group at this point.
And the A-holes, the A-holes and D-bags, yeah.
Right, that's if you're on there with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what's an A-hole without a D-bag?
That's right.
So anyway, the point is that, yeah, I might have to get into uploading more videos, making more content, something to keep my mind busy and something that, I can try to have some fun with and everything. So be on the lookout for that.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, NBA-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at NBA-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
But Andrew, I asked the community, because you and I know this, they're working on NBA 2K25 right now. Like, there's the conversations are taking place around the table. They're talking about gameplay enhancements. They're testing things out, with a new build for the game and all of that stuff. And they're looking in on the forums and looking in on feedback that they're receiving on various social media platforms and whatnot. So it is definitely not too early to have, somewhat of a gameplay wish list.
I'd say now is the ideal time to actually put in those suggestions, because we're getting to the end of when they can feasibly do some of this stuff. So it's absolutely time to be talking about it. I agree.
Right. And so I wanted to keep it kind of short and simple in order to kind of avoid any tangent that might happen related to the question, because we did get a lot of responses to this. So my community question was, what are the top 3 gameplay changes that you would like to see for NBA 2K25? So obviously improvements over NBA 2K24. Now, I have my top 3, which was actually very tough for me to choose. But obviously, because we're only doing 3, I had to limit it a little bit. But what are yours?
So I have a very succinct list here. My top 3. Number 1, motion and physics system. Lighter movement, less suction, more responsive. Honestly, more like 2K14 to 17. That is my number 1 wish for motion systems, physics engines, etc. You and I are big fans of that. That Ego motion system that came in NBA 2K14 was there, I think, at least for 16-17. It's a very familiar motion system to the earlier titles, 2K14 and 2K15, even though they're not promoting Ego motion in 16 and 17. It certainly does feel closer to that system than the revamped, shall we say, the new system they brought in 2K18 and have had and been working on since. So motion and physics, put it together there, just the way the players move and interact, that is such a big one.
No, absolutely. And I agree with Shady Mike actually on this, and we've been talking about this for years. I think that this motion system needs to be scrapped, and I know that's not easy. I just think it needs to be scrapped or completely reworked and actually built from the ground up and bring back some of the qualities that everybody loved from 2K14 through 2K17 through that motion system when it relates to great foot planning, less suction, shooting that wasn't frustrating, shooting that was overall more realistic, the way the players interact with each other on the court. The way the AI worked in those games. My brother and I have been playing a ton of NBA 2K16 lately, Andrew, and the AI blows away NBA 2K24's AI.
Yes.
From the way they play, as far as playing realistic, as far as being, the way they react on defense, where their positioning is on offense and whatnot, and a lot of the way they even just do something simple like turn their body, right? Like we've talked about in this new motion system, how unrealistic and clunky it is when somebody tries to change their body position, like whether it be like pivoting backwards on defense or just sliding their feet or just trying to even turn a corner. When you play a game like NBA 2K16, all of those movements are just 10 times more fluid, 10 times more realistic.
Not sluggish,
and it looks better. You're not sluggish and not janky either. They're super janky in this new motion system. And it not only looks better when the computer does it, but it feels way better on the sticks as a user. So no, I definitely agree with your point, and just kind of the community's overall point of like, I think a lot of the community is sick of this motion system.
We're not alone. Yeah, it's a very common complaint, and rightfully so. The suction and things like that, those recurring issues, see a lot of people understandably talking about them. I would absolutely agree with the AI. I didn't mention that, but improving the AI is definitely something that needs to happen. You look at 2K14. You mentioned the 5-on-5 situations or regular 5-on-5 gameplay. In player-locked, my career style gameplay, I mean, you've seen what Terry Hansen does in 2K14.
I was just about to say, my God, the way Terry Hansen plays, the AI Terry Hansen, you would never, ever see an AI player doing that in NBA 2K24 or NBA 2K23 or NBA 2K22. The amazing intelligence of AI Hansen in that game. You've shown me plays where he crosses over and then he goes into a spin move once he has his guy leaning, and then he like goes into a reverse layup, right? Because he's going baseline, and it just looks so smooth and cool. And you've shown me plays where he saw an opportunity to go backdoor, and you see him run backdoor his guy, and then you throw him an oop, right? And he throws it down. I do think that the AI in the old motion system was much better than what it is in these new 2Ks. And I think that part of it is, yes, that programming, but also at the same time, it's, like I stated prior, just the player movement in this new motion system isn't realistic for a human body. I know that sounds weird, but just the ability to change direction, the ability to pivot, the ability to move your feet in a realistic manner, it just doesn't happen that often in the newest games. And I mean, they're sliding all over the place. The foot planting is just 10 times worse. So yeah, no, I definitely agree.
And keeping pace with the CPU as well. It feels like the CPU is a couple of steps quicker, which is very frustrating. It feels they have an unfair advantage trying to make a move. We do see many fantastic plays from 2K24 in the top 10, including more this past week, but it definitely doesn't feel as easy to make those moves as easy as it should be when you you're actually making good inputs and it's still not really happening because of the sluggish movement. So absolutely, AI is a big part of that. It's all connected. Second is a badge system closer to the original signature skills or the early approach to badges, just those smaller boosts to distinguish players, differentiate them from each other, instead of being these augmentations that we're relying upon in either my player builds or even just in regular player abilities. They do have a place, badges and signature skills, things like that, because they do go beyond the regular ratings to give players those extra abilities or small boosts to areas that they are particularly good at. Going back to Freestyle Superstars, it's the same concept. There is a place for that, but it's just become all about loading up players with badges, augmentations, abilities that just lead to canned moments, or they're just not particularly sim or what have you. Yeah, I would like to see. I'd like to see them move away from that reliance on badges. They talk about the reliance on green releases and reliance on this and that, but they still haven't addressed the badge issue. There's such a reliance on badges and the augmentations that they provide. There's a place for them in the game, both in original players and my player builds, but tone it down, Derek. That's what I say to them. Tone it down.
there's almost 100 badges now.
Yeah, we don't need that.
The NBA 2K games, and badges are artificial boosts. And I've said it many times before, it's one of the key ingredients to killing skill gap, like true skill gap. I've said it many times before, and I've seen the gameplay and everything. Somebody could not be good at the game. Somebody could not know basketball, and they could be playing against somebody who does know basketball and who is probably much better on the sticks. And that person who is better on the sticks and knows basketball and everything can absolutely get blown out in embarrassing fashion by this guy, because that guy has more artificial boosts, or artificial boosts that combat the other player. And I think that artificial boosts have hurt the game. I think that there's a way to put signature style in these games and spectacular moves and all of that stuff. And there's a way to incorporate upgrades in these type of games where it doesn't have to be so dominating on the court, right? Where it doesn't have to impact the court, the on-court action so much that it becomes super overpowering. So I definitely agree there.
And that's the irony about the whole situation, the talk of skill gap and so forth. Yet at the same time, the online scene is built around these badges, these augmentations, artificial boosts, as you say, that it's about what loadout have you created for your player rather than how good you are on the sticks. Certainly, stick skills come into it, but if you are fantastic on the sticks but your player is underpowered because somebody else has paid for quicker upgrades or done the grinding to get all these powerful badges and done the metagaming to get the build that is the most powerful and effective across all over the court, then your stick skills are negated by the badges. So, yeah, that is the irony of the situation. And that kind of leads into my third point, actually, which is less focus on the elitists of the online scene. And we've talked about they're not necessarily the elite gamers, but they certainly are elitists with elitist gatekeeping attitudes. And stop catering towards them. Bring back features like a rumble queue for precise timing. For that matter, don't rely completely on absolute precise timing on and green releases to make shots, but don't cater to that elitist attitude. Bring back those features, those onboarding features that help people learn the game and actually play online. Give them, when you're playing online, you have that lag. Having that rumble feedback is so helpful. Look, if you want to disable that in, I don't know, some kind of hardcore setting, fine, but also have that casual environment for people who don't want to play against the hardcore competitors, that you make that accessible to the more casual online gamer. Casual is a dirty word, but I also think there's a lot of gatekeeping in that. And to that point, bring back the ability to disable the dunk and alley-oop timing. Just have those onboarding features and those accessibility features that have, by not having them, has just made the game so catered towards the really toxic elitist gatekeeping online gamers.
So that's a great strategy for them, though, as far as a moneymaker, and that's what it's all about, right? It's the money making aspect. Yeah. Because what do they want people to do? Create more builds, right?
Naturally.
Create as many builds as possible. They want people to buy the gear that they see the top players wearing, right? And what does that take a lot of times? VC, right? They want people to get, to upgrade their gear. They want people to get as many badges as possible in order to compete. They want people to, right out of the gate, put a bunch of money into the game so their player is higher overall and so they don't suck, like completely suck on the court like you do right out of the gate with a new build without putting VC into it and everything. So that strategy of catering to the quote-unquote elitists, and I don't want to say elite players, I'm just saying elitists. I like your word choice there. I think that has paid off big time for them. I think that the company probably makes loads of money off that strategy.
That's the unfortunate part of it, yeah. It does tie into the pushy approach to recurrent revenue mechanics. Yes. So that's probably why it's a long shot to get some of that stuff to have them change direction on that approach, because it does tie into how profitable the game is. And as we've talked about before, that is how it makes most of its money. Yes, they're selling many copies, millions of copies every year. That is obviously profitable, but it is the VC sales. And, now it's in my team as well that you can buy cards directly with VC. So all kinds of ways to give them your money if you really want to, but which I don't, beyond buying the game, the base price. But yeah, that is the unfortunate reality of it. But with that being said, anything that makes the game more accessible. Have that more casual, still competitive. You're jumping online, you still want to compete and win and try to win, but it's not treating it like the home version of the 2K League, and we're not taking it super seriously and like it's life and death, even though it's a video game and all that stuff. But yeah, I'd love to see them back off the elitism.
So for my top 3 gameplay changes that I'd like to see, I cheated. I have 4. So I'll go over that real quick. But before I even get into that, I did want to let you know, I haven't talked to Andrew about this, but I attempted NBA 2K24, my team, on PC. Andrew, my brother, was sitting there while I was playing this, and he could tell the lack of fun that I was having, and he was just like, "Shut it off! Like, don't play it anymore.
Don't do this to yourself."
That gameplay is absolutely miserable. Just the amount of suction, the inability to shoot, the ridiculous gameplay mechanics and player movement and everything. And that's terrible, right? But also the pack odds are just as bad as they've always been. So I was opening packs, obviously, at the beginning of the mode and everything, and I got, I think it was 5 of the exact same 88 overall Andre Iguodala opening packs. Is it like 5 duplicates? And I didn't even open that many packs, Andrew.
It's ridiculous, yeah.
It reminds me of what happened a couple years ago when you felt like you were getting a Kazi Russell in every other pack, right? That's done on purpose, so you want to spend more money, right? So you put more money into the game to get more VC in order to buy more packs in order to get a player that can compete. And they've also turned my team into like this online competition mode, as opposed to more what it used to be, where it was like, hey, tackle all of these challenges, right? And do domination and all of that.
Yeah.
So now it's turned into play against other gamers in that mode. And you want to have the best players for that, right? But we're going to give you all of these duplicates, so you keep spending more money in order to get a player that can compete out there and give you a better chance of winning.
Which is funny because it makes me less inclined to spend money. When I keep getting doubles, I'm like, well, I'm not going to spend money to get even more doubles. Because,
But I will say this though, that it was the gameplay that pissed me off the most. Yeah. But the point is too, is we've also talked about this before, and we've read off people's responses to our own posts on X, but also to other social media users who said, how much have you spent on NBA 2K24? And they did the same thing for 2K23, and you see all those responses where people are like $200, $400, $800, $1,000, $2,000. We saw some that were $3,000 and $4,000, right? So
even more, yeah.
The strategy of making the gameplay super frustrating somehow is working. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
And the strategy in my team, and then also, like you said, catering to the elitist and whatnot, that strategy is absolutely working. And we've read from the articles where they show that 2K makes far more on microtransactions than they do just on the game's sales. So that's incredibly telling. So my top gameplay changes that I would like to see, and I'll try to make this quick so we can get to the community responses. Less skating, so proper foot planting. My brother and I are playing NBA 2K16, and we actually went into the instant replay, and this was last night. And every single time the player's foot touched the floor, it was planted properly. There wasn't sliding, right? Like in this new motion system.
It's possible.
And it makes the action not only look beautiful, but play that much better. It feels much better to play defense. It feels much better to get on the break. It feels much better to drive to the hole and take off. And it feels much better to, take a quick pull-up on the move, to do a spin move into a pull-up. It feels better to come over from the opposite block and, somebody's driving to the hoop and you get like a realistic swat, all of that. It feels better to just walk up the court with the ball, Andrew, right? To go up and down the court and dribble, even just in that simple capacity. So yes, better foot planting. That is number one. Number two, less suction. We've talked about it so many times. The amount of suction in this new motion system, especially since NBA 2K20, is absolutely frustrating on all levels. It is so unrealistic. You're constantly being dragged into the offensive player or the defensive player, depending on which side of the ball you're on. You'll go up for a layup, and you'll get dragged backwards into a defender completely unrealistically, and it will make you miss. You'll go up on the right side of the hoop for a layup, and somehow a player will get suctioned into you from the opposite side of the hoop, and he will unrealistically launch himself into you, and you'll miss that layup. There's suction on shooting. There's suction in the post. It is just unbelievably canned, right? And you know what it reminds me of, Andrew? So in new tennis video games, so my brother and I also play tennis video games. The majority of new tennis video games have a system where instead of you running to the ball and actually hitting it, like controlling that run, the game drags you to the ball, right? Like you'll push slightly on, like, to go to the right, and your player will move like 5 to 10 feet to the right in order to get to the ball. And it is just completely canned, right? You feel like you don't have control over the action, and it just absolutely kills those tennis games. So it's like almost in a way suction to the tennis ball, right? And that's what this kind of reminds me of. It's like we're playing an NBA game and we don't really have control over what's going on.
Well, that's
the majority of the time.
It's not just aesthetic. It's not just, it doesn't look good. Oh, they're skating a bit. It doesn't look realistic enough.
It affects everything. It affects everything.
It affects the result. Absolutely. Like you say, the suction dragging somebody across the paint into that contest animation, that affects the result of that now contested shot. So it's not just, their feet slid a bit on the floor, it doesn't look good. It actually has an impact on the action.
100%. And then the other one, so number 3, is they have to fix the shooting in these games. These games are so unrealistic from a shooting perspective. And I gotta laugh at the debate that was happening under this X post. And you and I were laughing about it in our chat when it was happening. You had one user on there stating that the game is marketed as a basketball simulation. So if you expect jam, like gameplay or arcade gameplay, go play another game. Listen. NBA 2K24 is not a good basketball simulation. I just want to throw that out there. I'm so sick of hearing it's a basketball simulation. If you don't like, it's the most realistic basketball game, and how could they go backwards with realism, and they only go forwards and everything. Stop it. Right? Like, I've played NBA 2K16, 2K15. I played pretty much the majority of basketball video games ever made, Andrew. And there are so many more realistic representations of basketball out there, from games that came out, a decade ago or even further out. You can't, it's not realistic to be playing on ice, to be skating everywhere. It's not realistic to never be able to really hit a contested shot ever, right? It's not realistic to be sucked into other players all over the court. It's not realistic to the way defense works and change of direction and that janky movement. It's not realistic to have the ball warping hands, right? Like, listen, it is not a strong basketball simulation, and it doesn't play like a real game of basketball. I just want to throw that out there. So there's a comment in that conversation where one of the X users stated that, there should be an ability to hit a contested or semi-contested shot. And one of the replies was, you've obviously never watched basketball before because, or you've never watched or played basketball before or something like that, because, you shouldn't be hitting those shots. Andrew, I played basketball all my life. You played basketball when you were younger. I was just playing in 3 leagues recently and everything. Semi-contested shots and contested shots, even in local leagues, go in a lot, right? I'm not saying the majority of the time, but they are absolutely makeable for good shooters, and even oftentimes subpar shooters, locally, etc. So, like, to be honest with you, the guy who said that 2K is an amazing simulation, like a great basketball simulation, and trying to act like he knows basketball, I don't care if he listens to the show or not. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, and I don't think you play basketball, right? And possibly don't watch it. And
I disagree with the other point that 2K is an arcade game at the same time, and I do think that.
Oh yeah, no. So the other user, can I bring that up too? Like, because like the other user who stated that NBA 2K16, and he said 2K16, I think in like 2K15 and whatnot, were so popular, he said, because they were more arcade leaning. He's wrong too, right? Because those games, and I play them consistently, are a more realistic representation of real basketball, based on the player movement, based on the foot planning, based on the lack of suction, because there's no such thing as suction in real life, Andrew.
Yeah.
Based on the shooting mechanics, based on the ability to hit contested shots from time to time, based on how space between you and the defender work and all functionality on the court and everything. No, they were both wrong. Both of them.
The argument was, he said, arcade isn't just NBA Jam style dunks. And no, it is. Arcade basketball video games are over the top, not realistic action. And while 2K24, for example, I agree that it is not the simulation game that we want. It is certainly leaning in that realistic style more than it is leaning towards being NBA Jam over the top, fast-paced action. Although some things like badges and takeover mechanics are kind of arcade-oriented. Video game mechanics more so than simulation basketball. But yeah, the idea that the 2K wasn't popular because it wasn't sim. The whole reason that 2K put NBA Live in the dirt is because it was becoming a more detailed and realistic simulation where Live was failing to be lifelike in an enjoyable way. 2K has always been about getting that realism in, or certainly as it was overtaking Live in both reception and sales. So the idea that 2K is not sim, the idea that the popular 2K games, what's one of the most popular 2K games to this day, Derek? 2K11, a very realistic sim-oriented game.
Yeah, and far less frustrating than NBA 2K24. I also want to point out that a game can say they're a basketball simulation, and people can scream simulation from the rooftops. But a simulation attempt doesn't make it a quality sim.
Oh
right?
Yeah, it can be like, a sim game. It's just a bad one. NBA Live,
right? Exactly.
NBA Live makes unrealistic.
It's an unrealistic attempt. It's an unrealistic attempt at sim basketball.
And I agree,
right? And a frustrating attempt.
Absolutely. And I agree that with a sim game, look, there are some liberties with realism, such as you may have more dunks in NBA 2K than in a real NBA game. Those kinds of breaks from reality are fine because it's more fun to do that way. But having NBA strategy and realistic abilities and players not flying 20 feet above the rim to somersault dunk, that is arcade. 2K is sim style. It is a simulation game at its core. Whether it is a pleasing gameplay experience or whether it reaches the level of realism that people want, or a lot of long-time hardcore basketball gamers want, is another story, obviously. But yeah, that was a very spirited discussion. I just want to put this out there as well, Derek. When you are arguing back and forth with somebody for 20 posts, it's okay to untag people who aren't involved with the conversation. That's just
I know we had to be put through that.
That's just good etiquette to untag people. Yeah. I just want to put that there.
Yeah. I also want to point something out, too. NBA Live 07 for Xbox 360, that was a sim attempt. Look at the way that game is paced, right? Look at the way the pacing is. It's not high-flying dunks way over the rim. There's real play calling. There's signature style, all of that. But that is an unrealistic, terrible, absolutely pitiful attempt at a 5-on-5 sim, right?
Yeah.
So you can say, hey, NBA Live 07, it's a basketball sim, all of that, but it's a bad sim, right?
I mean, it's sim by genre.
So,
it's sim by genre. It just fails to be a particularly good game. It's kind of like a bad comedy film. It's still a comedy, technically. It's just not very funny. That's kind of the same thing. By genre, yes. By results, not so much.
So before we get into the community responses, I had one more. One of the gameplay changes that I absolutely would love to see, and I think that this would have to be like a complete revamp of the motion system to make this issue go away, is just the overall janky movement of the players. Listen, it is an exercise in frustration for the AI or you, the user, to try to change directions in that game defensively, but between the skating, between the suction, but the janky movement, all of that, like it feels absolutely terrible, Andrew. And even the transitions with dribbling, like the ball warping from hand to hand, trying to turn a corner on a drive or trying to execute a spin move, all of that stuff, everything just feels awkward and absolutely terrible. If you go back and play NBA 2K11, or you go back and watch the movement in NBA 2K11 on offense and defense, you will see that the players plant their feet much better. They change directions more realistically. It doesn't look even close to as janky. And when did NBA 2K11 come out, Andrew? 2010.
Yeah,
that's 14 years ago, and whatnot. So
that's scary.
I think
but still, yeah,
absolutely unacceptable. There's so many issues with the player movement in these new 2Ks and this new motion system that I almost wish they would just scrap it and just try to build from the ground up, like really build from the ground up, like they said they already did.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I said, that we love that motion system from 2K14 to 2K17. It felt so much better. It wasn't unrealistic. It wasn't not fun. It was fun to play with. There was nothing wrong with that system. I realize they need to innovate, and maybe under the hood that system had issues that didn't allow them to move forward in other areas, AI related or whatever, but the newer solutions are not working as well as the old ones, unfortunately.
100%. And I also think that in a way, because of the way they've pushed and promoted these new titles, that not enough people are talking about it. I think that not enough people are bringing the gameplay issues to light. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about the microtransaction piece, right? There's a lot of people talking about certain modes and different things they want to see in the game. But I think that because of people's focus on badges, on upgrading their player, on builds, on my team, all of that stuff, I think that the more of the conversation is based on that stuff as opposed to the true frustrations that people are having on the sticks.
Well, the problem,
the action between the lines and everything.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the problem, however, is that whenever you start diving into that stuff, that's when you run into the get good crowd, because they say, "Oh, it's not that there's a problem with the game. You just need to get good. You're not." The game is fine, you're just not playing it properly, or you're not good at the game. So that whole discussion gets deflected by the apologists who are saying, oh, there's no problems with the game, you're just not good at it. I mean, as we've said before, Derek, you and I can make use of the mechanics in Live 07 to an extent. After a while, we just couldn't make things happen in that game we played, and we kind of gave up on doing it. But you and I can make the most out of poorly designed games and even have a good time, even if it's just to have a laugh. It's not about mastering it. Anybody can master clunky mechanics and kind of make them work as best as possible. Doesn't make them good mechanics.
Exactly. And I also want to point out that it's not a us against 2K thing. How many times have we spoken positively about past titles, shared footage of past titles? You're on year 6 of your micro of NBA 2K14. My brother and I are deep into seasons on NBA 2K16, NBA 2K17, NBA 2K14, etc. And where both of my brothers and I are super deep into seasons on NBA 2K19 and NBA 2K17. So we are loving a lot of the past NBA 2K games, and we love the direction of the company during those times, especially 2K17 and prior. And we loved a lot of the mechanics. Think about how excited you were when they implemented right stick dribbling with NBA 2K13.
Exactly.
And it changed how you viewed the series and changed how you enjoyed the games. And you were super impressed with how they implemented that.
And I've gone back to 2K6. I've gone back to games with the old iso motion and given them another try with a more open mind, and just posted a 2K6 video on the channel. Check it out. 2000 draft class versus 2001 draft class. I'm enjoying those old games too. So I'm going back and even giving games when I was that hardcore NBA Live fan and flying the flag for NBA Live and kind of not really giving 2K as much of a chance because they weren't really appealing to my sensibilities with their control schemes. I'm giving those games a second chance all these years later and saying, hey, you know what? I was wrong about this, or I overlooked these games. So
right, exactly.
I'm not anti-2K. Yeah.
Right. And we were critical of NBA Live 19 in a big way, especially after that first patch, after after the demo, and then and then the last patch and everything. But the fact that it was full of canned animations, the fact that the dribbling wasn't sound, it was really basically impossible to do like a real wide crossover or go behind the back and beat your guy. It was just like all small dribbles. We had issues with the lack of signature style. A game like NBA Live 10 had signature size ups in it. And NBA Live 19, a game that came out almost a decade later, you had no signature style, right? So and then the floaty passes in that game, and players always passing with one hand, which is very unrealistic. The ball looking like a beach ball when it came off the rim or the backboard and everything. So like NBA Live 19, we were super critical of that as well. So this isn't like a live versus 2K thing or us hating on 2K. This is just, if you're going to make a video game that preys on consumers, that is full of artificial boosts, that has frustrating gameplay, and is overall not a fun game and overall a bad sim, like not a realistic representation of basketball, then we're going to say it. We're going to call it out. And I don't care what company makes the game. And
we're not alone. That's the other thing, is that people are sharing these same criticisms. I mean, you can see it from the responses we're going to get to momentarily. But even before you threw this question out there, these criticisms, we're not the only ones making them. 2K fatigue is real, and other people do see the issues. There's some apologists and some, unfortunately, big content creators trying to shout it down and appeal to that elitist crowd because they're a part of that. But people are seeing these issues, and they're pointing it out. It's not just us. It's not just us being bitter old heads and hating. There's people who are 10, 15 years younger than us who have been playing games for a while, and they see the issues too.
In the past, in order to make change, it always felt like, you had to be a majority, right? You had to be like the majority of people want to see this change. You know what? We're going to make this change. Nowadays, it seems like they control who's giving feedback on the game and which feedback they listen to. We talked about this.
100%.
A lot of times it's people that have the following that they want. People that will promote the game for them no matter what and whatnot. People, even maybe people that, go to community day and that, are, shouting from the rooftops that that they love 2K, right? And stuff like that. And I'm not saying it's everybody, but I'm saying that the company is seeking out these influencers and people that will promote the game the way that they want the game to be promoted. And people that are going to talk about builds, people that are going to get people to possibly spend more money on the game and everything. And now it feels like, as opposed to a large majority asking for a change and that change happening, it feels like it's a select special group that gives feedback, and it's the feedback that they mostly take in, and then they go with that and they hope that those people will also promote the game, and then people will keep putting money into it. And it's just, it's unfortunately in 2024 at the height of social media, height of access, all of that stuff, height of YouTube, height of Instagram, all of that, like you are, unfortunately, if you're not one of those major influencers, sometimes you're not going to be listened to. So.
And you have to play the game, and we're not talking about the game itself, although that obviously does help. But you have to.
I don't have to play the game, and I won't. So
yeah, but as far as being an influencer that's working with them, you need to play the game, not just the game itself, but also the game of promoting the game and towing the line and giving that feedback in that way and in that area that they want, and catering to that audience that they're trying to handpick. So, yeah, the person that's eager to give nuanced feedback in an area that they don't really care about or they don't want to promote, then they get pushed aside. And NBA Live did the same thing with a 2K wannabe replace the previous community manager, pushed out the old guard who was talking about roster customization and roster sharing and fixing up Dynasty and everything, and tried to bring in people that would promote what they wanted to promote with that new direction. That didn't work out, and as unfortunate as it is, and as much as I hate to see the live series dormant, there's a large amount of "I told you so" there, Derek. We could tell that guy what the game needed, what long-time live fans wanted to see, what people who were getting sick of 2K wanted to have in an alternative, didn't want to pass it on, didn't want to talk to the old guard, wanted to bring in his own guys, and look how it worked out for them. Just saying.
Yeah, I also want to point out that I always had the feeling of they deserve it, right? They deserve what happened to the series and how it fell off and everything because of the stories you've told me, but just overall how they dropped the ball in such a big way.
Unfortunately, yeah.
NBA Live 07. and
we
whatnot.
deserve
And then
better. Wrote an article about that.
Oh.
We deserve much better as gamers, long-time live fans. The series itself deserved better, but yeah, the suits dropped the ball. That community manager who wanted to be a Ronnie 2K wannabe, it's a shame. And I would love to see live return, but they need to do it right, and they need to do it right by the long-time fans as well. As do 2K.
I'm all right with not being Ronnie 2K. I'll just put that up.
Yeah.
And so let's get into the community responses. I also wanted to point out that one of my points was on shooting, and I went off on a tangent there. The shooting, it's not just about the semi-contest and contest system. It's the fact that shooting feels absolutely terrible. I just want to point that out.
Oh, yeah.
Finding the release point and finding when you have to release the ball is so unrealistic and silly in NBA 2K24. It wasn't good really in NBA 2K23 either, but it's extra frustrating in NBA 2K24. The whole shooting system needs to be revamped. It needs to be more realistic. It needs to be more fun. It needs to be more intuitive. So I just wanted to point that out. But there were definitely quite a few responses for this community question, Andrew.
So you already mentioned Shady Mike's response to the question. Just to reiterate, he said, they really need a new engine. I don't know how else to say it. Worst foot planning in years, awful suction, ridiculous warping animations playing out on the way to the rim, and unfortunately, Pro Play made it worse. And on the subject of Pro Play, because that is an important point, they did bring that in the next-gen PS5, Xbox Series X version of NBA 2K24, of course, that I think it's resulted in some very nice animations, but as far as the feel on the sticks and player movement, it didn't improve that at all.
I don't really see it that much.
I mean, you can isolate a really nice-looking animation, and I say, oh, that looks nice, but it doesn't...
But they're getting dragged into it, though.
It doesn't affect gameplay positively.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah, like, that's what I mean. Like, I've seen some of the Pro Play animations play out, and it just looks awkward sometimes. Like, it will look smooth during the animation, but they kind of get, like, dragged into it.
Oh, for
sure.
Like
it's being forced by the game. So, like, I think if they're going to keep Pro Play in NBA 2K, they need to clean it up. Right.
Well, everything else needs to work properly. The rest of the movement needs to work fine. Otherwise, it looks nice in isolation. As I said, you can say, "Oh, that looks like the way Durant dips his head and goes up for the shot," and that's really realistic. But what was the movement heading into that animation, where he's moving around the court and catching the pass, and you're trying to run a play and everything else? How does that play out before that really nice animation? That's the issue.
You know, the funny thing is he was talking about the worst foot planning in years. You did a whole article on this, the lies of developer blogs. But in the developer blog, when they went to next gen, so when they went to PS5 and Series X, they were like, oh, now we can achieve foot planning that we've never had before.
Yeah.
We can achieve better, more realistic foot planning. And just the foot planning is 10 times worse than games like NBA 2K16, 2K17, 2K15. Games that were more fun and realistic and better overall basketball games from the past. So it was just, once again, a lie in the developer blogs, because if you actually go back to those PS4 Gen 2Ks, not only just PS4, Andrew, let's go back to PS2, PS3, etc. Those games just overall, the majority of them had far better foot planning than these games on Series X.
And you can check out that video essay on our YouTube channel. And I'm not only showing the games in action, what I'm talking about, but also pulling those quotes directly with screenshots of the articles. So you can see I'm not just twisting words when I say lies. As I said in that essay, Derry, I don't use the word lie lightly, because a lot of people do. Just throw it out there because they're upset about they've got something into their heads that it's going to be in the game but was never promised. No, I'm showing my receipt. I'm bringing the receipts on this one.
And Andrew thinks I don't read his articles. Come on.
Well,
I obviously
it was a video essay, so you know.
Oh, that's true. But I did read the article.
Yes, true. Yeah. So next up we have Relhouse, and says, as always, more responsive and fluid gameplay, less can animations, more physics-based for more true-to-life dynamic happenings, and core foundation basketball mechanics. And yeah, that's what we want too.
So he wants a new system built from the ground up. That's what that sounds like. Unfortunately, I don't think you're going to get it, Relhouse. I will say this about Relhouse. He has been trying to give NBA 2K24 a chance, but he keeps going back to NBA Live 19 court battles. And one thing I will say about court battles on NBA Live 19 is that playing that mode in that game gets rid of some of the gameplay frustrations that you have when you're playing, like trying to play like a 5-on-5 sim game in that game. I think that the action in court battles is looser. I think that there's more fun things that you can do, like one of the highlights he submitted with using Bone Collector and whatnot. I think that if it's probably the best live 19 looks is when you're playing court battles. But I have noticed that he likes those live 19 mechanics better, and he likes that he would rather play court battles on live 19 than anything on 2K24.
It's a good concept too. Good concept, that mode, being able to have those campaigns and you're not actually playing against somebody else online. You're going up against the squad they have put. I don't know, do you know what they call that in other games, like tower defense or something? I'm not sure, but it's kind of that.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the name. I'll have to look that up and see exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, we have to put together some kind of squad, and the CPU takes control of them, basically. Yeah, court battles it's a good concept. Leader of the Foot Clan, aka Chuck Cross, says, "Very minor but big to me. I want complete control over where I want to place my camera." And that's one of those little things, Derek, that I absolutely agree that really can make the experience, as far as both the gameplay camera, obviously, but also instant replay. A lot of 2K games, when you're trying to get the perfect screenshot or the right angle for a replay, sometimes getting that right camera placement when it snaps to an angle, that's frustrating.
Yeah, I just want to point something out about camera views. Bring back classic cam, like the NBA Live style cam. They had it in past NBA 2K games, the ISO cam. In NBA 2K8, it was called crowd cam, and it was a perfect isometric view of the court. And it's a great view of the court. You can turn the auto flip off if you want, so it doesn't flip on changes of possession and whatnot, and it just kicks butt. And then I was playing another 2K last night. I think, what 2K was it? I want to say it was NBA 2K12 for PS2, and they have a camera view on there called 200 level. And once again, it is this beautiful isometric view of the court, all zoomed out, and it gives a great view of the action. It reminds you of the old NBA Live games, and it's super functional on the sticks. So I would love to see NBA 2K come back with a good, solid, zoomed out isometric view that gives users a great look and feel for the action. As far as the instant replay camera, I don't have too many complaints about that, because I'm not like trying to get shots of people's feet the majority of the time, right? Like close-up shots. Normally I can find a pretty good camera angle that represents, what I'm looking for a shot, for a highlight or something like that. But yeah, I would love to see that classic ISO cam come back.
Feels like one of those things that every game should have, a standard camera option, along with the broadcast cameras and also the baseline angles, because a lot of people do prefer them for the player lock modes, and as I do too. But when I'm playing 5-on-5 gameplay, player unlocked gameplay, I do like to play on the broadcast camera. Of course, there are many of us, and no, it does not make us lesser gamers for playing on broadcast view. Just want to put that out there once again. Bucky T says, "Better foot planting. This tremendously affects gameplay, improved shooting mechanics and rim mechanics, and less suction." And yes, that's all of the above.
So I just want to point out, I do not run the Bucky T account. I want to say that is actually a different human being.
It's not a sock puppet. He's just a...
I can promise you that is not me.
Very much real.
Him and I are so similar as far as, the improvements that we'd like to see in these games. Him and I both kind of identify issues in a very similar fashion, and I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, we and Bucky have got very similar ideas, very similar views of basketball games, and always cool to hear from Bucky. Next up is Rock. Jeff Cortinas, of course, says more contact off the ball, more stamina penalties for both sides of the ball, less reliance on badges, lower bonuses, or extreme acquisition conditions. And yeah, I touched on badges. They do have their place. Signature skills and badges do have their place in the game. I don't like the way they're currently implemented. They are definitely affecting the online scene, if nothing else. And yeah, contact off the ball and stamina penalties implemented properly. Yeah, I absolutely see that point.
Yeah, I think I don't want more suction off the ball. I do want to point that out, but I want realistic contact off the ball. And that means that if you're going to, backdoor your guy, or you're going to, V cut and then pop out to the perimeter, a realistic like contact with the defender, like even like a slight push off, or like if you're going backdoor, kind of getting your hands on that defender as you move past him and everything. That I don't think that's ever hurt basketball video games, right? It's a realistic element that doesn't delay the play, and it looks awesome on the court. So, I don't have a problem with more contact off the ball, as long as it's not like that unrealistic, like being sucked into the other player.
Next up we have Tail Dog, says improvements to inbounds plays. Back in 2K12, where we could choose the inbounds plays during a timeout and choose exactly who the play would be ran for and who the inbound passer would be. And also adds, add defensive rebounding options to defensive settings in OTFC and pause menus. We have to call timeouts to change them currently. So yeah, some strategy options. Obviously we've been talking about mechanics and engine issues, but yeah, that's certainly something to add as well.
Or you could be like me, since the beginning of my days playing basketball video games, and just use the player you want off the ball and run him to the guy who's passing in the ball from out of bounds and catch it, and that's how you start your play. Yeah. I'm just kidding, but that is probably what 99% of people have always done. Like, I want the ball in Steve Nash's hands. I'm going to run him to the guy passing the ball in, and I'm going to catch it, and I'm either going to shoot if I have space, or I'm going to start the offense. But no, I think, running plays like stack out of bounds and whatnot, I think that adds an additional element of realism to the game. And how fun is it in a game where you do have out of bounds plays, where you do run it properly and a guy back cuts off of a play like stack, and you throw him an alley-oop and he throws it down, right? Exactly. And if you do that in a video game, send it to me, because I want to put that in the top 10, number one. Number two, it's definitely a good feature to have in a basketball video game, especially one that's marketed as a sim.
Devin says they need to bring back 2K14 PS4 controls and 21 graphics, but it probably won't happen. And that's interesting, Derek, because obviously I've been playing a lot of 2K14, 6 years into my career, as you noted earlier in the show, and I love that game, I love the controls, but I kind of like the passing controls from 2K16 onwards, where you do have the 3-pass buttons, double tap, lob pass to throw the alley-oop, things like that. I do like the changes they made over the next couple of years, but I could certainly use 2K14 PS4 controls, and I also prefer the dribbling controls in 2K14 actually straight down or away from the ball if you're using camera relative, to go simple behind the back. They've changed up some of the dribbling moves in recent games where they feel a bit more contrived than I think they need to be with stick movement. So, you know what, there's some changes they made in 2K15 and 16 that I would take over 2K14's controls, but if they did bring back 2K14 PS4 controls, Derek, I could definitely be at home with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best controls in NBA 2K history are in 2K16 and 2K17.
Yes.
I think just the right stick usage, the way that works when you're going to the hoop, you're going baseline, etc. The way dribbling works in those games. I think the double tap of Y for alley-oops, and then the double tap for fancy passes, the posting up with the bumper as opposed to using say you're on PlayStation, like triangle, right, Y or triangle, right. So I think that my favorite controls in NBA 2K's history as far as functionality come from 2K16 and 2K17, because if you remember correctly, 2K15 was still had some of that 2K14 in it.
Yes,
in relation to controls. So he mentions 2K21 graphics. I said at the time that I didn't think that it looked like a PS5 title. Like, it didn't look like a jump to me, and I stand by that. I actually did some side-by-side screenshots of 2K21 for PS5 with a game like PS4 NBA 2K19, and then like games like 2K16 and 17. I think that I think PS5 and Series X overall just wasn't a jump from a graphical standpoint, and I am going to stand by that, and certainly not from an animation standpoint. But I didn't not like looking at NBA 2K21, right? Like, I don't think it was a bad-looking game at all. So, I don't see a problem with his response there either.
Next up, Snakebite has some gameplay changes specifically for multiplayer. Says forced on-ball defense, meaning user defense would auto-switch to defenders closest to current ball handler. Remove 2K camera or any angle similar to it, and remove alley-oop timings, make them shot percentage based. And I mean, I can see the point on all of those. I think it's going to cause more problems if you absolutely force people to auto-switch, although I do think that people playing off-ball online is definitely cowardly, and it's worth calling out on the microphone. I know Kenny's done that before, playing people in my team online, has called people out for playing off-ball defense, and it does feel very cheesy. Look, I don't think you can remove 2K camera, because some people do like it. I do think
you'd make a whole lot of people pissed off if you remove 2K
that's...
camera, because unfortunately, even though you and I love broadcast, like that's our preferred camera when we're playing the NBA side of things and all of that. Still, I think the large majority of players, especially those who play online and whatnot, they're using that 2K camera.
Some kind of 2K camera or drive cam, or one of the older over-the-shoulder cameras. Turbo is one of them. My career default. I think that's the one I use in 2K14. My career default, which is still that baseline angle. It rotates a different way. It works better for my career. Otherwise, I do prefer broadcast camera, as I've said. But yeah, I don't think you can remove that, because people need to have that option. Maybe you want to add more options to change that view and change it without having to go into the game. But yeah, it needs to be there for people who want it. But I think maybe more control over the camera views before you get into gameplay. Put that option in the menus before you get into gameplay. Bring that back. Alley-oop timings. I know you're a bigger fan of it than I am. I do, as I said, would agree with being able to shut it off. I don't think shot percent based. I guess it does come down to player ability and also how well it's thrown and how much sprint you have left in the sprint meter and so forth. But being able to turn it off, I don't think it is the skill gap that people say it is. And certainly in offline, I mean, he's talking about multiplayer, but certainly in offline player, let people turn that stuff off and streamline their experience if they wish. That's not hurting anybody.
Yeah, I think the alley-oop meter is not necessary. I've gotten used to it. And I think as long as it's functional, I think it's more functional and makes more sense in NBA 2K24 than it has in, than it did, what was it? Was it 2K22 where it was just super frustrating? It was either 2K21 or 2K22. It just didn't make any sense at all. Just the functionality of it was terrible. But I don't think it's necessary to have in the game. I think that as long as it's functional, it doesn't kill the gameplay. And it can be fun when you're playing co-op, right? Because if I'm throwing an alley-oop to my brother, now he has to time that alley-oop, and it becomes us working together more as opposed to the game just playing out that finish, right? So, I think it can be good for co-op. I want to point something out, though, in relation to the auto-switch thing. The worst thing that you can possibly do, I understand his point about guarding the ball. Remember, I said on a prior NLSC podcast how stubborn I am. I'm like, I have to guard the ball.
For sure.
Which I had you and I... which was part of a reason you and I lost a game on NBA Live 16 because of all of that player movement momentum. Because I was trying to guard the ball, and it's almost impossible in that game, and the computer kept getting by me, right? Because the defender moves way too slow in comparison to the offensive player in that game. It's one of the game's flaws. But the worst thing that you can possibly do, and this is what's been hurting NBA 2K gameplay so much over the last few years in this motion system, is take control away from the player.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't want more of that. I understand his point, but we can't keep taking control out of the player's hands. There's already enough of that with the frustrating shooting, right? The inability to hit contested shots. The skating where you don't feel like you have enough control, the suction where you're missing layups, even though you're in real life, you're completely wide open, but somebody gets dragged into you, right? There's already enough of taking control out of the user's hands.
Yeah, I think you need to incentivize playing on-ball defense. Maybe if you are playing on the ball handler, you'll get a slight defensive boost, or maybe a slight defensive nerf if you let the CPU control. I mean, if you are going to be cowardly in online play, incentivize playing on ball rather than forcing it.
Damn cowards, Andrew.
Shrek 2 fanboy, and we promise this is also not a sock puppet of ours. Shrek 2 fanboy says, look, the engine just needs an overhaul at this point, but I'll turn it down for points 2 and 3. Less suction on screens, player collision shouldn't function as hot glue, and the shooting mechanics need to be retooled with 24 has awful shooting. And yeah, that's pretty much how we feel too.
Where are the NLSC fanboy accounts, Andrew? I'm waiting on those.
Yes.
We don't have any.
Well, like I say, when we get our a-holes and d-bags into our Twitch streams, that's when it'll come.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be streaming on Twitch, but if I do get back into streaming, it will probably be on YouTube.
Next up, we have John C. says, remove the force field plays where certain actions keep me from contesting shots or getting out to cover a shot. Fix the impossible green window changes when you shoot a close shot and it is a massive green window, then randomly disappears to a tiny window in the last second. Yeah, once again, the shooting mechanics are such a big deal, and it's those little things like that where it's screwing the player over at the last second, where that's not really skill-based.
The funny thing about his force field comment is still that's a form of suction, but you're just being suctioned into an invisible wall. That's what he's talking about with that, where he goes to contest and he should be able to go and contest a shot, and the game just doesn't allow him to contest. It like freezes him, basically like he's hitting a wall. And I have seen that happen in those games, so I know exactly what he's talking about there. And yeah, the shooting sucks.
And this is my career base, but it does come down to a gameplay mechanic. Says, this is still John C. in a second tweet or post on X, as it is now. Find a mix between badge regression and the old system. It is tough to maintain badges without going back and grinding to keep them, and some badges you can't trigger without the proper opponent. For example, big man defense, yet you don't play any bigs the post up. And yeah, I think the badge regression system was just such a huge mistake in 2K24. It's just made an already problematic system even worse, and like you said, there's situations where you can't do the things that you need to do to maintain the badges. I know they've patched it they've addressed it in some of the patches, but yeah, the badge regression system, yeah, you already have to grind so hard for them, and ratings on top of that, and VC to upgrade your attributes. So yeah, find a better system than that.
But what did that do though? It got people to spend more money on the game.
Yeah.
Your badges regress, you're frustrated with the
Yeah.
game. It's time to create a new build. It's time to get new stuff. So again, there's in my opinion, the majority of this stuff comes back to how much can they get people to spend.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, there's a method to the madness, if you will. Jane Gang says, literally no clue how a pass stuns me when my back's turned. I'm running to the open man, then a pass stuns me with 94 perimeter defense. Gold Interceptor needs a buff too. Why can't I catch a ball thrown right to me? 90 steal, and I'm swatting a ball out of bounds.
That does happen quite a bit, by the way. There's also a delay in catch animations in that game where you feel like, you make an appropriate pass to a wing, and instead of just a clean catch and being able to shoot off the catch, the guy goes into like a kind of a delayed catch animation. And you know how impossible it is to hit semi-contested and contested shots in NBA 2K24. But by the time you land and you're able to shoot while your feet are sliding all over the place, and technically in real life you're traveling. Sorry, I just hate the foot planning in these games. But by the time you land and you're ready to shoot, your defender is right in your face. So, yeah, that's unrealistic. And I do see where he's coming from there.
So we do have a few more responses on Facebook, a couple others on X. Some people were talking more about modes and features. And look, that is an important discussion. We will circle back to that. And as we compile our wish list, please add those suggestions to our wish list. We will come back to those topics in future shows. But heading over to Facebook now, Kieran says, for gameplay, specifically animation locking, way too often your player is locked into a predetermined animation with no ability to move them or get out of it. This happens a lot in rebounding, shot attempts on the drive, and on-ball defense. So once again, canned situations, canned moments.
Yeah, and canned animations are one of the things that I noticed really impacting the gameplay and being way overpowering starting in NBA 2K20 when they had another kind of revamp of like a modification of the 2K19 motion system. And I agree, you're constantly in canned animations. And the suction that we talked about so much on this show, those are canned, Andrew. Those are canned animations. The suction is canned. It's part of the developer's package with this game. So, yeah, it happens a lot.
And Kieran also mentions shooting. Improvements have been made, but shot making still seems more dependent on using the correct move with the right analog stick than the actual shot timing itself. This makes it unrealistic and allows people to cheese shots by spamming particular dribble moves. And on the subject of shooting, Keith adds, when it comes to gameplay, I wish they'd fix the no green, no make rule when taking shots. I think it's stupid because in real life, there are a lot of those shots we don't expect to go in, but do anyway.
Yeah, and don't expect to get a ball that bounces in realistically in NBA 2K24 because the rim mechanics aren't even as good as in like NBA Live 96. Like you actually get bounces in NBA Live 96 where the ball goes off the front of the rim and then goes in, or we've actually seen one, I want to say, that went off the front of the rim, the top of the backboard, and then in. But in NBA 2K24, it still pretty much is swish, drain, or bust.
Yeah.
So I think it's completely wild that we're on the newest generation of consoles. NBA 2K24 came out in 2023, but games from the 90s and early 2000s and whatnot have way more realistic results when a shot goes up and it hits the rim, and way more variety. That's telling to me. And I think that that's something that definitely needs to improve.
Well, it's like the foot planning. It's like everything else. We have seen this before in much older games that came out in the 90s. So we know it's possible. And yes, there's a lot of moving parts in games, and there's many ways that today's games are far ahead of what we had growing up. But at the same time, are they as fun on the virtual hardwood? And we say no, and a lot of people agree with us. And yeah, a lot of us feel that it comes down to those core issues of shooting and physicality and no suction and foot planting and gameplay balance and badges and other augmentations and attribute systems. So we're not alone on these issues, Derek, and it's nice to hear from people, obviously, but also that we're not alone in wanting these specific things.
You can see a lot of common themes in the responses.
Definitely.
So it is nice to see that a lot of people are on the same page, and also just nice to see that people are voicing their opinions, right? And their frustrations.
Definitely.
It's the same as we like when people give proper praise. I think proper criticism and proper critiques, I think it's very important. So, Andrew, I did have another community question that I put out there, but we're going to push that to next week. Also, because I'd like to see a few more responses on it. I did ask the community, what NBA player got you into basketball, and also historically, what has been your favorite basketball player to use in video games. So we have, I think, 4 or 5 responses on that, maybe more right now, but I'd like to get a few more, and we will talk about that on the next show.
That'll definitely be a fun thing to talk about on next week's show. In the meantime, thank you once again to everybody who responded to Derek's prompt, and it is Wishlist season, Derek, so we encourage everybody to keep posting those ideas. We will have that wishlist topic in the NBA 2K24 section. Eventually it'll get moved to the NBA 2K25 section later this year for the NBA 2K25 wishlist, so keep an eye out for that, and yeah, keep contributing.
Yeah, I love this community. I love the fact that we get so many responses on these mailbag questions week in, week out on the various platforms. I love the fact that, people want to see the game improve, that people are sharing their thoughts, and and that they still continue to share gameplay, right? I think that the top 10 has been incredibly strong in this new year. We just released year 3, week 36, and it never gets old putting it together, and I love the community's highlights.
It's great to be part of this community, Derek.
Yeah, I love it. And, I was a NLSC member for a long time before, joining the team and being a co-host on this podcast and creating content for the site. And it's just added an extra layer of awesomeness to basketball gaming for me. Being able to, be more involved with the community, being able to put these mailbags out each week, being able to, do this podcast and talk basketball video games with you, and then get those responses from the community, whether they enjoyed the show and whatnot. And, being able to put the top 10 together, get the community's highlights, talk to them on X via DM and everything. And, it kind of feels like a family. And I think that it's just awesome.
Once again, that social aspect of basketball, and of course basketball video games as well. And yeah, there's a reason I'm still doing this over 20 years later, that I'm still creating content and playing basketball games and enjoying them and finding new ways to enjoy them. And yeah, shout out to our community as always.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for everything you do.
More fun to come, but in the meantime, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. Best way you can get in touch with us, and of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on X at D for3G and at D for384. I'm also on YouTube, D for3, and on the NLSC, D for3.
I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.